Today on Hardtail Party, we're going to talk about soft tails. Today we've got an original Ibis Ripley Soft Tail, and we're going to take a look at it, measure it on the geometer, and take it out on a trail and ride this thing. Soft tails fit in between full suspensions and hardtails. They're kind of a blend of both. They're not really hardtails. I guess they are full suspensions, but they're the simplest type of full suspensions. I remember my first time riding a Moots YBB. I only rode it around the parking lot in the 90s when I worked at a bike shop, but I was fascinated by the idea. The fine folks at Ibis were kind enough to send me this museum piece. I'm going to take extra special care of it, but I can't wait to throw a leg over this thing and ride it on the trail. I've never ridden a soft tail on a single track before, so I'm super excited about this. I'm going to read some of the marketing copy about this bike. This came out in 2001, this model. This model belongs to an Ibis employee. Very nice of them to let me borrow this. The Ibis Ripley is an aluminum soft tail with 1.25 inches of rear wheel travel. Let's convert that. That's 31.75 millimeters. So there are no pivots on this bike. It relies on the chainstay flexing. And yes, this is made out of aluminum. And yes, aluminum does flex. I know what you guys are thinking. No way, aluminum doesn't flex. If it does, it'll fatigue and it'll break. Ibis knew you would be thinking the same thing. So in 2001, this is what they say. What? Flexible aluminum? I don't believe it. People often express disbelief when they hear about the Ripley aluminum soft tail. For most people's sensibility, aluminum and flexibility don't play well together. And they're right. Back in 2001, Cannondale was coming out with super lightweight aluminum frames that were cracking all the time because they were overly stiff. Specialized had that M4 alloy where they would fill the pores of the aluminum, I think with carbon, just to make it even stiffer. Man, those bikes rode so stiff. So Ibis knows people knew that aluminum was stiff. But the real mind blower is for people when they get past their first ride. Combine the featherweight snappiness of an aluminum hardtail with the supple, subtle smoothness of that 1.25 inches of rear wheel travel, and the result is indeed hard to believe. I'm excited to try this thing, and I'm always thinking modern hardtails that are comfortable with big tires that squish. I've been wondering how they stack up compared to something with like 1.25 inches of travel. It'll be exciting to compare. The bike is similar to the Silk Tie, which is a titanium version of this, but this was a lot more affordable. So this frame sold for $995. So even in 2001, frames weren't exactly cheap like a nuke-proof Scout or something like that. The complete bike with XT and Manitou Mars came in at $1975. There's a lifetime guarantee on the chainstays of this and a 10-year warranty on the frame. We're at 20 years now. Frame's still going strong. This has some really cool stuff. Let's take a really close look at this. We have a Fox Float 32 up front. We have 26-inch tires. We have these incredible Paul V-brakes. They feel every bit as good now as they did brand new. That's what I love about Paul's stuff. It will be around in 20 or 30 years on your bike, even with daily riding. They're absolute things of beauty. We've got 26-inch tires with Kenda small block 8s, full XT 10-speed with a 2x in the front. We've got Chris King hubs, Thompson seat post, and a WTB saddle. Thompson stem. We've got Crank Brothers bars and lizard skin grips to keep it period correct. I can't get over how good these Paul V-brakes feel. We got race face turbine cranks, and we have the coolest frame I've probably ever had. Let's take some close-ups at this frame so you can see what's going on. Now, I know a lot of people aren't going to be able to get past the idea of an aluminum chainstay this thin flexing. Think about wheels, though. Aluminum rims flex all the time, and we don't worry about rims fatiguing from flexing. We worry about them fatiguing from impacts. So if you engineer them right, aluminum can have some flex to it. And it's not like this thing is folding in half. It's just got enough flex for up here to move 33 millimeters. So this frame uses a super thin aluminum chainstay, and it's flat. It's wide so it stays rigid left to right, so when you're sprinting it doesn't just bob all over the place, but it's thin this way so it allows it to flex. Reminds me a little bit of the Production Privy chainstays. I've been dying to ride one of those. I've always wondered what this bike would ride like if it was a true hardtail and this was kind of fixed. If these chainstays would be able to give it a softer ride, kind of like the Banshee Paradox. I think that'd be really interesting to try. Now, we only have 2.1 inch tires in here because these are so wide, you run out of tire width. Back in 2001, 2.1 inches was a lot. But nowadays, we all like our 2.6s, and to make something that would fit a 2.6 would make the chainstays come way out to here, and that wouldn't be very feasible. Still, I'm intrigued. I want to see a modern version of a soft tail. Here we can see the chainstay. It's just this really thin, maybe 4 or 5 millimeter thick aluminum plate. And it's got these relief holes cut into it to allow it to flex. And you'll notice they're on the non-drive side because you don't want the drive side to flex while you're pedaling. Really, really interesting design. But yeah, there's no pivot there. It's just welded straight to the bottom bracket shell. No pivots over here. And then it comes up into here where the elastomer is. That's just kind of like, how do I describe that? It's a rubbery plastic. It's a little bit like a hockey puck in there. There's no rebound adjustment. There's no compression. It just moves enough to take the sting out. And you could order these with different size and thickness elastomers to match your weight a little bit better. But that's about as simple as it gets. So it's called a soft tail because it's softer. It has a little bit of give, but it's not like a true full suspension. I mean, it kind of is because there's suspension in the front and suspension in the back, but you don't have a shock in there. You just have an elastomer. I guess the first full suspensions only had elastomers anyway. It's pretty funny, back in the 90s and 2000s, this is what was in your fork, was just these rubber pieces. You couldn't control rebound or compression. It just kind of squished. And if you were heavier, you put in stiffer, thicker elastomers, and over time those would disintegrate and dry out and rot. This thing is too cool. Let's throw it on the geometer. This thing came in at 24.6 pounds. That is impressive. Now, a lot has changed since 2001. We're running 29-inch tires with much bigger tread. We're running disc brakes that have rotors and hydraulic fluid and calipers that are a lot heavier. We have dropper posts on our bikes. We have much beefier suspension components. You know, bikes are just being ridden so much harder off bigger man-made terrain that wasn't around in 2001. So smaller wheels, smaller brakes, leads to a much lighter bike. This is the weight of my carbon Spot Rocker 29er. All right, let's talk geo. Chain stays are 425. That's pretty cool. Front center, 655. Wheelbase is 1085. Now this is an 18-inch frame. This is bigger than I would ride back then. We measure it on the seat tube length. So it's pretty interesting that even an 18-inch frame is smaller than a modern medium frame. Bikes have certainly gotten longer and slacker and bigger wheelbase. They're traveling faster speeds, and so they're designed more for higher speeds than darting through, switchbacks and stuff. It's got a 10 mil bottom bracket drop. It's got a 565 stack. But it's got a riser stem with riser bars, which will be nice. That'll bring the effective stack up a little bit taller. Head tube angle, what's your guess? I'm gonna guess 69. 69.5. And seat tube angle, 70.5. And the reach is 410 on a size large. That's pretty funny how things have changed. But then again, we had longer stems, and so the effective reach was actually a little bit longer than that. But man, a lot has changed in bikes. Still, you can still find hardtails with 69-degree head angles and pretty short reaches like this. It's amazing how many companies haven't strayed much from this. So this has been really interesting to see what's changed. Now it's time to take this thing out on the trail, see what it rides like. Yeah, I'm excited. This is my first time riding a soft tail on dirt. Oh, the bars are narrow. so maneuverable / twitchy. So funny how we've come so far in the last 20 years on bikes. Man, this thing is light. It's zippy and it's simple. It does not feel like a full suspension in the slightest. It just feels more hardtail-ish. And I think that's probably some of the appeal of soft tails. Man, these little small block 8s are doing better than I expected. Boy, geo-wise, the narrow bars, I think, are the biggest thing. I think running a little shorter stem with the Surly Sunrise bar, and this thing would feel fairly modernish. Man, it gets up and goes. I'm not feeling any flex when I pedal. That steep head angle, you get used to it after a while. Definitely encourages you to steer with the bars. It does not require a modern technique at all to ride. You can ride it just like most non-skilled or lower skilled riders would ride it. Just get on and pedal these tires. I've already had a couple two-wheel drifts at super low speeds. I'm not gonna push it today. Paul V brakes are plenty for me. I know everyone was stoked on disc brakes at this time, but man, a good set of V brakes are awesome. You think about it, you got a 26-inch rotor essentially. All that leverage. I'm feeling a little bit of comfort back there. This is so interesting. It is not a harsh aluminum hardtail ride feel, but man, it sprints like a aluminum hardtail. I don't feel like I'm getting bob when I put power down. This is a really cool feel. You know, if you're willing to ride a little bit slower, these older bikes with older geo and older riding position are still a ton of fun. I had fun mountain biking in the 90s, 2000s, 2010s, and now in the 2020s. Part of my goal of this channel is to help people reconnect with the joy of riding more than just pushing the fastest time humanly possible and racing everywhere. And today I'm having just as much fun on this thing as if I was on my Binary Maniac. It's less playful. I'm not manualing and I can't go quite as fast, but the connecting with nature and spinning and feeling the joy of being out here alone and soaking in my surroundings and challenging myself, it's wonderful. Here we go. Oh, we got up it. Now a soft tail is the perfect way to describe this bike. It's softer than the Banshee Paradox V3. And that's one of the more soft aluminum hardtails. But this bike doesn't feel like a full suspension where the rear tire just tracks the ground. It feels more like a hardtail than a full suspension. Feels like it's softer than a compliant hardtail. It just takes some of the sting out. And I think softtail is the perfect nomenclature. It's not behaving like a full suspension, behaving much more like a hardtail. Man, 26-inch tires with fast rolling tread that are narrow are so light and efficient. Bike feels super light. I'm so scared of getting a pinch flat out here. Being tubed. It's funny, you look on the sidewall and it says max 80 psi, minimum 30. We're at 35. Seated position is so stretched out. We've got this long stem, super slack seat angle. So despite the 410 reach measurement, and remember, reach only affects when you're standing up. Effective top tube's long on this thing, especially when you factor in the stem. If this was your only bike and you hadn't ridden anything modern in the last 10 years, you'd still have a blast on this thing. If your trails were primarily black diamond and double black diamond, it'd be a harrowing experience. But for most trails, you just slow it down a little and enjoy it. All right, let's talk about ride feel. I do not feel the rear end moving one bit. It feels stiff like a hardtail side to side. Man, it just feels like I'm on the most compliant frame ever. Got a lot of vibration noise from chain slap. Yet it feels like 10 mil of travel, not 35. But, and travel's the wrong word, it just feels like a super detensioned wheel or a super compliant wheel set. I mean, this is even more compliant than like a Zip 3.0 Moto wheel set. So it is doing something, even though we got that old elastomer in there. What a cool feel. Definitely more hardtail feel than full suspension. Ooh. Let's try that again. Slip the pedal. These have beautiful vintage Chris King hubs. The original high engagement hub. Let's see if I can do that better. The biggest notice between this and a modern bike besides the bars is dropper post. There we go. Took a little more skill. Second try, but I got it. Oh, what a fun bike. I would be beyond thrilled if Ibis brought back a soft tail. And I don't even care if it's just elastomers you're putting in there. Just takes 10% of the edge off. It's still a hardtail. Braking is still like a hardtail. Like I said, we're not getting the wheel tracking the ground. We're just getting the harsh hits taken off a little. So how does this compare to that P&W Coast dropper? It's different. The Coast dropper, which has 40 mil of suspension built into it, is awesome. I took it bike packing on my Axial and I fell in love with that thing for bike packing. But that Coast suspension dropper only works when you're seated, and it's only suspending your butt. So it's protecting your body and your spine when you hit bumps. Morning. Thank you. So that Coast dropper gives your body some suspension, but if you're on a stiff frame, it's still going to be stiff through the feet. So I do see a lot of people would be fine with a hardtail with that Coast dropper if you're seated most of the time. But when you stand up, the benefits go away. What a joy. I wish more hardtails felt like this. All right, now I need to find a company to partner with to make a soft tail. Because this, I'm actually glad that it's aluminum, because it's got lightweight, it's affordable. But man, what a joy. When you get up and sprint, it puts power down. Not noodly in the slightest. Yeah, this is more compliant than a great wheel set. Pretty awesome. And it's still got the simplicity of a hardtail. No shock pumps needed. No pivots to grease or maintain. Oh, what a joy. I'm really enjoying this. Okay, we need a modern soft tail. Who am I going to partner with to design one? I can't wait. This thing is great. What a beautiful bike. This just goes to show that high-end components stand the test of time. This build is 20 years old, and this thing feels as tight as a drum. And each component just feels solid and great. There's something about mechanical and non-electric bikes that you get 20 years later still going strong. Morning. Oh, this thing is awesome. I'm sad I have to send this back because it is so cool. I might have to find an old one and buy it and make it modern. I think that'd be a fun experiment. It was really cool to see how bikes have progressed in 20 years, but also to see how much fun you can still have on a 20-year-old bike. Man, this thing just feels so solid. The drivetrain is updated, the shifters and derailleur and cassette, but everything else is period correct to 2001. These Chris King hubs feel brand new. Granted, this bike hasn't been ridden a ton. It's a museum piece. But man, what a beauty. What a treat to be able to ride this. Yeah, if this had modern geo, this would be one of my top recommendations for a hardtail for a lot of people. Good morning. Good morning. Thanks a lot. Oh, that's perfect. I can get right by that. Thank you. Have a great day. I still think there's a place for soft tails. Man, it just takes a little bit of that edge off. It'd be fun to do an apples to apples comparison. Right now, it could be tires at 30 PSI. It could be the fast rolling of these small block 8s. It could be the super light weight of this. It could be just nostalgia talking here. Still, I think this is a really rad little bike. We are seeing some hardtails with built-in compliance, like the Banshee Paradox and Enigma. And it really does work. I think this is even softer, even more muted and damped. We see the Production Privé Shan. I've never ridden one of those. I've been trying to get one for years. They need an update in the Geo department as well, though. Their bike's Geo is 10 years old. But they've got these little leaf springs in the chainstays that look great. Moot still makes the YBB. You can still get it. But the Geo's about the same as this bike. It's real interesting with a lot of small builders. They haven't really modernized. Even the Moot's Womble, which they claim is their shreddy bike, has pretty dated Geo. Some of those old school builders just struggle to jump to the bleeding edge, and they just stay in the safe zone where bikes were 5 to 10 years ago. And even some new bikes ride a lot like this bike. And I get it, some people want that, and that's okay. If you like this older ride style, but you want newer standards, that's cool, they exist. But man, their marketing makes it sound like it's super slack and super rowdy. Oh, thanks a lot. Just me. Have a great morning. Thank you, take care. Oh, this bike is silent except for that chain slap. I just throw a little piece of mastic tape on that flat chainstay and have a silent ride. What an absolute joy. First time riding a Softail on single track. I'm quite impressed. Softail is a perfect name, not a full suspension. You can't feel like when you hop on the bike, it doesn't flex or squish. You just get a little bit softer hardtail experience. We need more people willing to push the boundaries of Softails. And I'll see if I can find a couple companies who are open to the idea, because I think it'd be really cool for a lot of riders. In my next video, I'm going to compare this to a modern hardtail and see how the feel compares with soft wheels and big tires. If you like this content, make sure to subscribe, give this a thumbs up. And if you need help picking your next bike, check out my Patreon service. Thanks for watching, everybody. There's a party in the mountains, and you're invited.